Welcome to another episode of You and Me and Multiple Sclerosis. My name is Pam, and I've been living with multiple sclerosis for 37 years. This whole week is going to be temperatures above 100. So we're finally getting our summer. Here it is late July, and we're finally getting some hot weather to join the rest of the northern hemisphere. But given that it's so hot and I'm pretty much staying inside where it's a little cooler, I'm going to talk about loneliness. I came across a graphic the other day. I spent some time looking at it, and I had my husband look at it too, just to make sure I was seeing it right. Let me go ahead and pull it up and show you. Here's a graph of who Americans spend their time with according to how old they are. So if you look at the x-axis, it's the age in years. It starts at age 15. And goes up to age 80. And if you look at the y-axis, it's the time in minutes going from 0 up over 400. Obviously, we're not talking about a 24-hour day here, because 24 hours times 60 minutes is way more than 400 minutes. So they may not even be counting the hours of sleep. They're just talking about waking hours. And as they say down in the footnote, which you can barely read, if you spend time with more than one category at the same time, they're counting those minutes in both categories. So there's some double counting going on here too, maybe even triple counting, but whatever. Before I get into the weeds, I guess I need to talk through this table a little bit. The point that they're trying to make is that the older we get, the more time we spend alone. And that's certainly what you can see. That curve is unmistakable. It starts out with pretty much 0 or close. When you're 15, you don't really spend much time alone. But by the time you're 80, it looks like you spend well over 400 minutes a day alone. Obviously, you spend more time with coworkers during your working years, but then when you're very young or when you're older and retired, that's not true anymore. But yeah, spend some time looking through this, because it's sort of sad in a way that older people don't spend much time with family or friends or children, and I don't know if that includes grandchildren. I got to thinking about, well, this is America at large. How would someone with multiple sclerosis, how would they graph their time? And it might be something interesting for you to think through too. How many minutes a day do you spend with your partner or with your kids or with your friends versus the time that you spend alone? There were a number of websites that I found that had definitions of the word loneliness, but my favorite was the one that I found on the Black Dog website out of Australia. Loneliness is that negative feeling that arises when our social needs are unmet by the quantity and quality of our current social relationships. And I like that idea that it's the quantity and the quality. So it's not just how many people you're around, but how fulfilling those social relationships are for you. They go on to say that loneliness is common, affecting around 1 in 3 adults. And that's just the general population. Now, according to the MS Society of the United Kingdom, here's what I found on their website. According to a 2018 survey, 3 in 5 people with multiple sclerosis feel lonely because of their condition. So that's considerably more than the general population. They go on to say MS is unpredictable and different for everyone and can cause problems with how we walk, move, see, think, and feel. Issues with mobility, losing employment, stigma around disability, and a lack of understanding from loved ones can all contribute to social isolation. We've talked about some of those on this channel before. The lack of understanding, I think, is pervasive. Even the people closest to us oftentimes really don't understand even when they think they do, and maybe especially when they think they do. It can make us feel kind of isolated because we just can't communicate it. There's no way to really share what we're going through. And then back to the Black Dog site, the subjective nature of loneliness means that people can live relatively solitary lives and not feel lonely, while others may lead a seemingly rich social life and feel quite the opposite. Loneliness is not a sign of vulnerability, fragility, or weakness, nor does it occur only in people who are physically isolated or who are elderly. We can have many people around us and still feel lonely. I think this is a great point for us all to remember, that there's a big difference between loneliness and solitude. Because remember from the very first slide that loneliness is an unpleasant feeling. Solitude can actually be a peaceful and positive feeling. If that's what we really are after, solitude, it may be just the right thing. I don't think it breaks down perfectly into introverted versus extroverted personalities, but I'm going to just venture to guess that an extroverted person who finds themselves isolated by physical disability or for whatever reason is more likely to feel loneliness than someone who is more introverted and prefers actually being alone, looks for opportunities to be alone, and has plenty to do just on their own, and they don't really need the company of anyone else to feel like their day is worthwhile. And I think that brings up an interesting point for us. As we look at these studies and we look at these graphs and we see how many minutes a day an individual spends alone, we have to say, okay, look past the data a little bit there and say how much of that is preference versus how much of it is forced upon the person. Certainly it would be lonely if you really wanted companionship and you didn't have it. Certainly it would be lonely if the people that you lived with ignored you or misunderstood you or left you out of important decisions. That would be very lonely. But it's not necessarily a bad thing to be all by yourself if that's what you prefer. And there's no way to get behind that data right now to see who is who there. But I think it's something that we should think about for ourselves. When we're by ourselves, people might think we're lonely, but maybe we're not. I know as I've gotten older, I've preferred solitude way more than I did when I was younger. And I think some of that is my MS, but a lot of it is just me. I think that I have, over the years, accumulated many interests and things that I like to do that are solitary pursuits. They don't require, or sometimes it's not even a benefit to have anyone else there along with me. Well, as far as some suggestions for dealing with loneliness as opposed to solitude, because of course, if you're enjoying your solitude, keep on doing that. There's no need to feel guilty about enjoying being by yourself. But if you do realize that what you're dealing with is actual loneliness and you'd like to make some changes, here's a site that I found. It's not specific to multiple sclerosis, but it's out of the United Kingdom. It's mind.org, and it's got a section on loneliness with some tips for dealing with that. So how can I manage loneliness? As you see, they've got a number of different suggestions. So let's just scroll through a few of these. I'm not going to talk in detail about every one of them, but there's a few in here that I think I will talk about a little bit. Take it slow. This was important, I thought. If you're feeling lonely for a long time, and even if you already know lots of people, it can be terrifying to think about trying to meet new people or opening up to people for the first time. And that would be particularly true if you don't get out a lot, if for whatever reason you're pretty much at home mostly. And they give a good example here that you could try doing an online activity where other people attend, but you are not expected to interact with them. So you can take a drawing class, or you could join a new group or a class. Whoever runs the sessions would probably just let you watch at first rather than taking part. And you'd want to feel that out. If you're not really ready to be in the limelight, just make sure that the person that's running the meeting knows that you'd like to attend, but you don't really want to be the center of attention. And as they say, simply knowing that other people are there may be enough to help with some feelings of loneliness. And of course, peer support is always good. They give some different ideas. I don't know about befriender services. I'm not quite sure about that one, but an online community, I can't say enough good things about that. My MS support group has really filled that role for me because all of us understand each other really well. And I think there's something to that to be together with other people with whom you can communicate easily because they understand where you're coming from. There's just no substitute for that. So I guess that's of all of the ideas, I think I would recommend something like that the most. And then here under Make New Connections, we've already talked about joining a class or a group based on your hobbies or interests. That could be good. Something that has nothing at all to do with multiple sclerosis. Maybe you would like to be in a book club, or maybe you are interested in collecting certain things, or maybe you're interested in armchair traveling. You never know what kind of groups might be out there. There's knitting and crocheting groups. There's food-oriented groups. There's all kinds of groups out there. Just see what's available in your local area. And again, this might be more useful to people who can get out a little, but it's still worth looking at. And then the second thing there about volunteering, that's really helped me a lot. I volunteer through my church mostly. I am the head of the Sunday school ministries for our church, and I have taught children. My real passion, I guess, is for teaching teens and young adults and older adults. I love to give them a chance to explore scripture in a way that they hadn't really thought about before, maybe, or maybe had never even been exposed to before. It's really a lot of fun, and it's just a good way to interact with people. If you don't feel like leading, you can certainly volunteer to help. There's always things that can be done administratively or keeping attendance records. Another way to volunteer, by the way, if you can't get out or you don't feel like getting out, is a card ministry. Like at our church, we have a couple of different card ministries. We have one internal to the church where people send birthday and anniversary cards on behalf of the church. And then also there's sort of an outside ministry where we send cards to people in the hospital, not personally, but just we give the hospital a bunch of cards thinking of you, get well, that sort of thing. And those can be distributed by the hospital staff. So as you see, there's a lot of different options. And I think you could probably suggest something if you thought of an idea that you didn't see happening. You could probably suggest it and you could see it happen. Try to open up, they say. You might feel that you know plenty of people, but what is actually wrong is that you don't feel close to them or they don't give you the care and attention you need. Well, I think for those of us with multiple sclerosis, that can actually happen. It's hard to be in a crowd full of people who just don't get it, don't see why you can't do what they do or that your energy level isn't what they think it ought to be. It's harder, actually, when you don't, quote unquote, look disabled. If you're not visibly struggling physically, they don't really understand at all. And so that it can be very isolating. And they say that in this situation, it might help to open up about how you feel to friends and family. But if you don't feel comfortable, you could try speaking with a therapist. And I will say that that's always a possibility, that perhaps you just need to find somebody to talk to that understands or at least will let you explain and will listen. But I don't think there's any substitute for talking with someone else who also has multiple sclerosis, I will say. Be careful when comparing yourself to others. It's very hard to stop comparing ourselves to others. We all do it, but it can help to just be aware that things are not always what they seem from the outside. You look at people and they're doing things. I know every time I see somebody run up and down the stairs without even holding the hand railing, I can't help but feel a little jealous of that because I used to do that. But boy, there's no way I could do it now. So yeah, I'm comparing myself with them. But they're using social media as an example that when you see people posting pictures and videos of themselves on social media, it's a very distorted view because you don't see every part of their day. You don't see all the challenges that they deal with, or the bad moods that they're in, or the bad moods that their family is in, or the challenges that they might have that they just don't want you to see. So that's a trap that we have to be very careful of. Whether we're just out in public or whether we're looking at something on social media, we really need to be careful not to compare ourselves to other people. Finally, look after yourself. This is also really good advice. Feeling lonely can be very stressful and can have a big impact on your general well-being, which might make it even harder to make positive steps to feeling better. And this is true. If you don't look after yourself, you're just going to go into a spiral. So some of the suggestions that they have, I think these are tried and true. You've heard them many times in many places, but here they are again. Try to get enough sleep. Think about your diet. Try to do some physical activity. Regardless of your situation, there's always something that you can do. And on top of that, I would also add mental activity. If physical activity is really not your thing, mental activity can also provide some of those same benefits. Spend time outside if at all possible. Spend time with animals, they suggest. If you have a pet, that's great. You know, animals really have been shown to help us with our blood pressure and mood in general. And then finally, avoid drugs and alcohol. Drugs and alcohol can unstabilize your mood, right? You don't really want anything that's going to make a bad situation worse. A lot of people think that by using drugs and alcohol, they're going to avoid negative feelings, but that actually might backfire. It might even make things worse. That was just something that crossed my mind. I wanted to share that graphic with you and have you think a little bit about your being alone and whether the things that I had brought out reflect your life or not, and whether you're actually okay with that or not, and what you might want to do about it if you're not okay about it. Because I'm not going to tell you what the right thing is to do if you're not okay with it, but you do need to address it. It's not good for us physically or mentally if we continue to feel that unpleasant isolation. If you're enjoying it, being alone, great. I know I do. A lot of it, a lot more than I used to. And if you're in the same boat, great. But that's all I have for you today. So take especially good care of yourself in this heat. And I will see you again in my next video.